UV resin is kind of miraculous, but it's also got a dark side. Still though, just because something's dangerous doesn't mean that we can't use it. Chainsaws are dangerous. Lasers are dangerous. Even cheese graters are dangerous in the wrong hands. But we still use them. If you're watching this video, you're probably a grown-up. And as a grown-up, you are responsible for your own safety. So I'm not here trying to tell you what you can or can't do. And this video isn't here to scare you, it's here to teach you how to use resin safely so you can get to the good bit, the models. And here's the best bit. Staying safe with resin is actually really simple.
Simples.
And at its most basic, there are 2 steps. Step 1, don't touch uncured resin, so wear gloves. And step 2, don't breathe in resin fumes. So crack a window as a bare minimum, but ideally wear a respirator. So there you go, you're already ahead of 60% of the people who watch these videos and click off before minute 3. So if you're still here, hi, I'm James, please like and subscribe. Now let's go a little bit deeper. Now I reckon there's really 3 rules to resin safety. 1 is protect yourself. Wear the right PPE, that's personal protective equipment. 2 is pick your resin wisely. Not all resins are created equal, and some are much more toxic than others. Number 3, work smart. Improve your setup and your habits to reduce mess and risk. Let's start with the gear. At its most basic, you're going to want some gloves. Now you're going to want nitrile gloves, not latex gloves. Latex gloves can interact in kind of funky ways with chemicals, so you're going to want nitrile gloves. You're going to want to buy these in bulk. You'll use more than you think you will. I mean, I'm quite tight and tend to reuse my gloves wherever I possibly can, sometimes 2 or 3 times, but in reality they don't last forever and you're going to need to replace them and you're going to need to bin gloves. So buy more than you think you need. I normally have 2 or 3 boxes knocking around in my workshop at any one time. And you're going to want gloves because, and this is a bit of a pro tip, because sensitization is a real thing. Touch uncured resin too many times and your body may just turn around and go, nope, I'm allergic now. And that means any future contact could lead to rashes or at worst anaphylaxis or something like that. And it's why with any itching or weird rashes as a result of the resin, you should go and see a doctor. I'm helpful, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a dermatologist. Second bit of gear you're going to want is a respirator. There's lots of different types of respirators out there, but a little sort of COVID mask isn't good enough. You need something that makes a proper seal around your mouth and ideally has 2 filtration units, ideally for organic vapours. Simple carbon blocks aren't really going to cut it. The other thing you need to know about respirators is you need to change the cartridges, guys. The standard advice is you want to change the cartridges after 40 hours of use or every 28 days, whichever comes first. Because after that, those filters are basically just decorative. Number 3 essential bit of kit to protect yourself are goggles. It seems like overkill to wear goggles when you're using a 3D printer, until you accidentally glug a bit of resin into your vat and it causes a splash which hits you on the cheek and you think, ooh, that was a bit close. Or when you're peeling supports off your models and a little bit of brittle resin pings off and hits you in the eye. You're going to wish you'd worn goggles if that happens. And the last one, I guess, is optional, but why not go full Breaking Bad at this point and wear an apron or a lab coat or something like that? That's why I wear this pink hoodie after all, because it's my crappy old painting hoodie and I don't care if I get it ruined. But if you get uncured resin on your clothes, it will ruin them forever. So, what about the resin itself? Well, let's bust a myth straight away. All resins are toxic. It doesn't matter if they're labelled eco-resins or water-washable resins or plant-based resins. All resins are extremely toxic. As a quick breakdown, the resins on your shelf will include about 30 to 60% monomers, that's the reactive stuff that hardens, 20 to 40% oligomers, that's the structural backbone of the resin, 1 to 10% photoinitiators, that's the stuff that triggers curing in the resin, and then up to 10% additives and fillers, which are things that change the properties of the resin, so colour, curing speed, viscosity, that sort of stuff. Special shout out here to ACMOs, which are a specific type of filler which do things like change the curing rate and the viscosity, which have kind of revolutionised the way resins work and have brought us lots of cool types of resin which do very specialist things, but are also incredibly sensitising. Remember ACMOs, I'm going to come back to them shortly. So that brings us to the different types of resins you can get, and I'm going to stick to the basic ones you're going to see in the 3D printing hobby. There are lots and lots of different types of resins, from dental resins to ceramic resins to casting resins. Your standard resins are things like your high detail resins or your tough resins. You clean them with alcohol and they're often loaded with ACMOs, but they're also the most versatile and usually the cheapest as well. There's your plant-based or eco-resins. They use plant-based monomers. They're still toxic. Instead of using oil-based, petroleum-based monomers, they're using ones made from things like soya instead. There's no other real benefit other than that. In fact, they're often slightly more challenging to use, and as I say, they're just as toxic. And then there's your water-washable resins. They wash with water, not with alcohol, which feels convenient, but I think is significantly more dangerous. Some of the chemicals they include in order to make them water-soluble are actually more toxic than the alcohol-washable ones, and I think they encourage people to dispose of resin waste down the sink. And if you dispose of resin waste down the sink, not only do you expose that whole sink area to potentially toxic chemicals, but you also release all those toxic chemicals into your local water source, your aquifer. And those sort of chemicals are extremely toxic to aquatic life. Personally, I usually advise people to avoid water-washable resins completely. I will say water-washable resins used to have a reputation of being brittle, but that's pretty much not true now. I just don't like them for the reasons I just said. If you want to know more about how I clean up my prints though, I've got a video on the topic and I'll link it up the top somewhere. The point I'm trying to make here is all resins are toxic. It doesn't really matter about the marketing or branding that wrap around them. The only products that really exist that make resins slightly safer are ACMO-free resins. Do you remember them? And ACMOs are worthy of your attention because ACMOs are sensitizing, and removing those additives from resin 3D printing is a step in the right direction. Like I say, it doesn't make resin safe by any stretch, but it does remove one potential element. Now there's pros and cons for using ACMO-free resins. The pros are obviously that you don't have those sensitizing additives as part of your 3D resin. The negatives are it usually comes with some sort of performance or cost compromise. Now I want to give a shout out to Formlabs here because the Formlabs Creator series is what really drew my attention to ACMOs and made me aware of them in the first place. Formlabs have done a bit of a marketing campaign recently trying to raise the profile of ACMO-free resins and just make people aware of them. They've got a couple of cool articles on the subject, I'll link those down in the comments below. But I've been testing one of their ACMO-free resins recently on the channel and yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it. It produces good minis, they're detailed, very tough, very brittle, but yeah, I mean, they work, they do their job. I'm not sure I would rush out and buy any because they're still quite expensive, but if you are sensitive to resins or you have some sort of, contact dermatitis or sensitive skin in general, ACMO-free resins are a way that you can potentially 3D print, and it could be a way back into the hobby for you. It's certainly worth checking out. The Creator series has 2 resins currently. There's a clear and there's a tough, both retail for around about £50 a litre. They produce great models, but they are significantly slower to print with, and that's simply because they don't have those ACMOs which are specifically designed at speeding up the curing time of resins. As a result, they take longer to print with. Pros and cons. Anyway, this isn't really a resin test video, but I did print a couple of models and they're on screen right now for you to have a look at. As I say, I was pretty impressed, to be honest with you. So if you're prepared to trade off a bit of time for a slightly safer resin, then this is an option for you. And I just want to say a huge kudos to Formlabs for bringing this to our attention and making the product available. Options. It's another option at the end of the day. Now let's talk about your workspace. So you're going to want to set up a wet zone. That's an area where you can have uncured resin, but it doesn't come into contact with everything else. Silicon mats or garden centre style planting trays are your friend here. That way everything uncured can stay inside that area, and when you're done you can just pick it up, take it outside, pop it in the sun, let it cure, then it's safe to touch and you can bring it back inside. It's a really simple way to manage a sticky situation. Not sorry. Now for me there's a few main areas you're going to want to focus on. That's when you're pouring resin into the vat or pouring resin from the vat into your bottle to store it again, when you're taking prints off the build plate, when you're removing the supports from the prints, and when you're cleaning the prints before curing. To help make those steps safer, I would use funnels instead of just trying to empty the resin vat straight into the bottle. Funnels will make the whole thing much more controllable and easier to manage, and you're much less likely to get drips all over the place. When you're doing any sort of cleanup or removing the supports, have IPA, bin bags, paper towels on hand, so you can very quickly mop up any spills or dispose of any waste products. Tongs are your friends here because you can use those to pick up uncured resin and move it around from place to place, and then when you're done, chuck the tongs into the sunshine, let them cure, and then they're all safe again. Oh, and use a heat gun to soften up the supports before you pull them off, because then they won't be brittle and they won't ping off and hit you in the face, although you should be wearing goggles. The big thing to remember is once UV is cured, it's safe. So if in doubt, cure the resin somehow. You can either use a UV torch, or you can pop it in the sun, or you can physically cure the models in like a UV curing station. Anything like that works. One of the best upgrades I ever made to my cleanup station was to have baskets for my wash fluid. That meant instead of just having loose tubs that I had to fish around and pull my models out of and get submerged my hand in IPA, I could just put it in a basket, then lift the basket up, let it drip, and then move it to the other place. Much cleaner, much more convenient too, frankly. And then the final tip I'll give you is just really be mindful where you're putting your hands, particularly when they're covered in sticky resin. The buttons on all my equipment, the buttons on my camera, my spatulas have all had their incredibly sticky moments, and yeah, you just want to try and minimize that whenever you can. So use some common sense and yeah, don't touch stuff with uncured resin on your hands. It's simple really. Obviously if you do touch stuff with uncured resin, I'll say it again, pop it in the sun, let it cure. And then once it's cured, it's safe. So if you've made it this far, thank you, you're an absolute legend. And I hope this was useful. This wasn't the most glamorous topic, but I hope it allows you to understand some of the issues around resin safety and basically just lets you have more fun 3D printing without the long-term health implications. So like, subscribe and share if you have found this helpful. And if you want to go the extra mile and support me as a creator, then join the channel as a member or follow me over on Patreon. The links are all down below. If you already do that, you're an absolute hero. Thank you so much. I am going to look forward to chatting with you over on the Discord very soon. So all that's left to say is this has been RisingApe Minis. My name's James and I'll see you next time.